In Module 4, The Psychology of Gambling, we're going to dig deep into the core psychological drivers behind gambling behavior, those internal forces that create the compulsions, justifications, and self deceptions that keep a gambler trapped. Understanding these psychological factors is crucial because it explains why gambling becomes an addiction and why the cycle is so hard to break. We'll cover the psychology of chasing losses, how dopamine plays a central role in the addiction process, and how cognitive distortions like the gambler's fallacy keep individuals stuck in a loop of irrational thinking and escalating behavior. Let's start with one of the most significant and damaging behaviors in gambling addiction: chasing losses. This is the compulsion to continue gambling after a loss in order to recoup money that's been wagered. It's rooted in a belief that winning is the only way to regain control and eliminate the discomfort caused by loss. When a gambler loses, there's a sense of emotional pain, frustration, and often humiliation. The more they lose, the more determined they become to win it back, not realizing that this compulsion leads to even bigger losses. This phenomenon is similar to what's known in addiction theory as loss aversion. Chasing losses is just another cycle. We lose and experience emotional pain and then increase our stakes to recoup or even take riskier bets with bigger payouts, only to find deeper losses. Chasing losses is a cornerstone of a gambling issue. When clients or family members describe this need, it signals they're in an emotional decision making phase. When family members describe this, it signals that they're in an emotional decision making phase and all logic has gone out the window. Loss aversion in gambling terms is known as rage betting. Essentially, the gambler's brain processes losses as more painful than the pleasure gained from winning. So the brain becomes fixated on the idea of recovering that pain. One of the interesting facets of rage betting is that it's not uncommon to doom scroll social media by searching for the game you bet on, especially if it lost on a crazy play, to see all of the other people equally as angry about it. In a strange way, it was somewhat comforting knowing that I wasn't alone. Imagine that. I felt alone with my friends and family because I had to hide my gambling, but I felt comfort with internet strangers solely because they also lost money on the game. I guess misery truly does love company. Michael Jordan has a famous quote when asked about having a gambling problem. He says, "I don't have a gambling problem, I have a competition problem," which is very interesting to read. When I look back on my gambling days, the early days of it were the mentality of it's me versus the sports books because I wanted to win money. Then came a psychological shift, and most gamblers experience this. Eventually, gamblers will turn to a mindset of me versus the sports book or casino to a me versus me. Towards the end, I didn't care if I won or lost all that much. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could actually gamble responsibly. I'd tell myself that I'm smarter than the books and casinos, especially when it comes to college football because of my background. I know the X's and O's better than some bookmaker. It's the same concept as Jordan's competition problem, and a lot of times I was right. However, the bookmaker was way smarter than I was when it came to what the conspiracy theorist in me is calling the psyop. Because I was competitive, I wouldn't walk away after a loss or slow down when I was on a winning streak. And when I was on a winning streak, I thought I'd never lose. The irony is that by the end of my gambling days, the competition wasn't me versus the sports books. Again, it was about me proving to myself that I could finally control the gambling. I didn't care if I won or lost. I just wanted to show myself I could manage it, and I never learned how. The quote unquote psyop was so powerful that I effectively forgot I was playing against the house and really just playing against my inability to control my gambling. But here's the trap: the more a gambler chases those losses, the further away the win becomes. Instead of simply stopping and cutting their losses, they double down, betting larger amounts in hopes of recouping their previous losses. Again, this is the loss chasing cycle, and it leads to progressively higher stakes and more destructive behavior. The emotional state of chasing losses clouds rational judgment, turning gambling into a compulsion rather than a choice. Chasing losses is what keeps gamblers trapped in an ongoing cycle where the losses increase while the rationalization continues to grow. This dynamic is incredibly difficult to break because the emotional need to get even overrides logical thinking, even when the odds are against the gambler. Now let's explore the role of dopamine, the brain's feel good chemical. Dopamine is essential in the reward system, and its release is a key motivator in addiction, including gambling addiction. It's what drives the desire to gamble in the first place, and it's what makes gambling so addictive. Whenever a person places a bet, especially when they win, their brain releases a rush of dopamine, creating feelings of euphoria and excitement. The surge of dopamine is reinforcing, which is why the gambler wants to chase that feeling again. The problem is, gambling is designed to create a near constant stream of dopamine responses, especially with the rise of online sports betting and micro betting apps. Interestingly enough, whether a bet wins or loses, the brain still gets activated the same way. So you start to detach from the actual result. You just want the action. Technology has only amplified this with 24/7 accessibility with the mobile and online casinos, so it's removed the natural stopping points that exist with traditional gambling. There's instant results that could eliminate waiting periods and the explosion in popularity of microbetting. Modern gambling platforms are expertly designed to maximize dopamine release frequency, mimicking the reinforcement behavior of slot machines, for example. These apps exploit this reward cycle by offering instant gratification. Gamblers are no longer waiting for a single bet to play out for hours or days. There's 24/7 accessibility, and now with microbetting, every single play, every pitch, every pass in a game becomes an opportunity to trigger that dopamine response. Take baseball, for example. There might be 300 some pitches in a baseball game. And if you can bet on every pitch, whether it's a ball or a strike, that's an opportunity to bet 300 times and get 300 different hits of dopamine. For the gambler, it's not just about winning, it's about the thrill of the game and the expectation of winning. This is why even losing bets can trigger dopamine, because the gambler believes that the next bet will be the one that pays off. It becomes a continuous cycle of highs and lows where the brain constantly seeks that next rush. One of the most important facets of this is the near miss, which activates reward pathways similar to actually winning. I'm sure you've heard the saying, close but no cigar. That's exactly what the near miss is, and it creates a powerful incentive to continue betting. The danger of this cycle is how well it's engineered to keep people hooked. When someone wins, they're rewarded with a dopamine spike. But when they lose, they still had that dopamine spike during the bet, and this frustration drives them to try again, hoping that next time they'll hit the jackpot. These apps don't just give them a game, it gives them a feeling. And that feeling, that craving for more, becomes the addiction. Another psychological driver we need to dive into is the gambler's fallacy. This is one of the most powerful and irrational cognitive distortions that keeps gamblers stuck in the addiction. It's the belief that past events influence future outcomes in games of chance, even when they don't. For example, if a roulette wheel lands on black 5 times in a row, a gambler might believe that red is due to appear next. Or they may think the coin has come up heads 5 times in a row, so the next flip is almost certainly tails. Or in sports betting, this team has covered the spread 5 times in a row. People will even get more granular, like this team has covered every game for the last 10 years in September when they play at home and the temperature is above 70 degrees and the wind speed is under 15 miles an hour. I'm truly not kidding. And if you have any logic, a 10-year period is so wild to look at because each year the teams and players are different, but a gambler will use this as a reason to bet. Inherently, I knew every outcome is independent, but I was looking for something to justify a reason to bet on the game. And then I told myself it made sense. This belief is based on the fallacy that randomness is somehow cyclical and that the past influences the future. In reality, this is a fallacy. Each spin of the roulette wheel or each flip of the coin is independent of the one before it. The odds don't change based on the outcome of the previous bet, but gamblers who believe in this fallacy will continue to gamble with the conviction that the odds are in their favor, which only encourages them to make larger and riskier bets. The gambler's fallacy is not just about miscalculating odds. It's a symptom of a deeper need to rationalize the addiction. Gamblers are trying to find a pattern in a world that is entirely random. This belief that they can control or predict outcomes keeps them locked in the cycle, perpetuating the belief that they are just one bet away from winning it all. Another crucial psychological driver is the compulsion to bet. This is where gambling moves from being a choice to becoming an addiction. The compulsion is driven by the brain's need for excitement and reward, and as gambling becomes a habit, the person feels an overwhelming urge to place bets, even when they don't want to. One of the key aspects of this compulsion is that it's no longer about the desire to win money. It's about the experience itself. The rush, the excitement, the emotional highs and lows become the primary motivation. Even when the gambler knows they shouldn't be betting, the brain's addiction to the experience makes it nearly impossible to stop. And in the digital age, the accessibility of gambling makes it even more difficult to break free from this compulsion. Gamblers are no longer restricted to specific locations like casinos or racetracks. They can gamble anytime, anywhere, on their phone, in their living room, or even during work breaks. Or in my case, while driving. And I don't mean that I just had a live bet going on. I would actually stream the game on my phone and watch it. This constant availability feeds the addiction, and the impulse to gamble becomes harder and harder to resist. Many gamblers set rules for themselves as a way of managing their behavior, rules that seem logical and responsible on the surface. These rules are an attempt to create some boundaries around their gambling, but often they're part of the same cycle that traps them. The problem isn't just that the rules get broken, it's that they are often self serving and designed to justify the continuation of gambling. Looking at a few common ones like one bet a day, this rule is designed to limit the amount of gambling in a day. It sounds like a good way to control impulsive behavior. However, the problem is once a gambler places that one bet, their mind is already invested in it. If they win, they're excited, but if they lose, they often feel compelled to make it back. In many cases, the single bet rule isn't a solution, it's just a temporary restriction. Then you have win loss limits. Many gamblers set a win or loss limit to stop gambling when they reach a certain point, like if they win $500, or they'll stop if they lose $200. The idea is to set boundaries to prevent excessive loss or to leave on a high note. But here's where the trap lies. The moment they hit either the win or loss limit, they often feel justified in breaking the rule. Well, I've already lost $200, what's another 50? Or I'm up $500, but I could be up more. These limits are flexible in the mind of a gambler, and the rules are often broken to chase the next high. However, that's dangerous because many times for me, I was $50 away from my limit, and then I lost $1,000 trying to win 50. There's also chasing the streak. Many gamblers set a rule that they'll only bet heavy if they're on a winning streak. Again, it sounds logical. They want to capitalize on momentum. But here's the catch. When they lose, they often convince themselves that that streak is just around the corner or that the loss was just an anomaly and they're still hot. I've been lucky lately. This is just one hiccup. This thinking makes it difficult to break free as they ride the emotional highs of streaks and fall into deeper cycles of hope and loss. Then you have the only bet what you can afford to lose rule. This rule is often seen as the responsible one. The idea that you only gamble with money you can afford to lose, ensuring you never risk more than you can handle. While this sounds responsible, it can often be a justification for more reckless behavior. The gambler may convince themselves that since the money is disposable, they can keep going after losses. The rule doesn't address the underlying emotional need to keep gambling, and it's often used to justify placing larger bets or continuing after significant losses. There's a few other ones like just one more bet, and this one's really common and dangerous. After a loss or a win, the gambler convinces themselves that just one more bet will turn things around. It's a rule based purely on emotion. And then lastly, you might bet certain game slates. This is a common self imposed rule to only bet during specific times or games. For example, someone might say on NFL Sundays, I'll only bet on one early game, one afternoon game, and one primetime game. The approach is designed to avoid placing a bet on every game, but it creates a sense of control that isn't grounded in reality. If that first bet wins or loses, the gambler might feel a pull to bet on other games anyways. The reasoning, again, is just one bet won't hurt. It's an illusion. The gambler is still dictated by the emotional highs of betting, even if they think they're limiting it. These rules sound responsible. They offer a sense of control and structure, but ultimately they're part of the illusion of control that gamblers create for themselves. The truth is, addiction doesn't follow rules. It follows emotion, compulsion, and a need for constant validation. Even when these rules are set with good intentions, they don't address the root of the addiction or compulsion, the need for the emotional rush, the dopamine hit, and the urge to escape. As I said earlier, I was self medicating with gambling for my depression by putting a band aid on a cut that I didn't know existed. The gambler is still trapped by their desire to get back to even and the need to chase that high or the fantasy that the next bet will be the one that turns everything around. In the end, these self imposed rules are just a way of rationalizing the addiction. They give the gambler a false sense of control while the addiction quietly reinforces itself. But as you can see, these rules are often self delusional and are just another way for the addiction to persist. The gambler's behavior is driven by emotion, not logic, and these rules don't break the cycle, they merely redirect it. Recognizing these rules is important because they give us a window into the thought patterns and justifications gamblers use. They are often not as much about control as they are about rationalizing continued gambling behavior. Let me give you an example of a common psychological trap gamblers fall into, one that shows just how distorted our thinking can become when we're in the heat of the moment. Imagine you're at the casino and you start with $1,000 at the blackjack table. You get on a little run and your stack grows to $1,900. Now, logically, you should walk away because you're up $900, but instead you keep playing. And of course, what happens? Eventually you lose, and now you walk away with $1,200. You're still up, but you're angry because you were once up $900 and now you're only up $200. You feel frustrated and upset, even though you still have more than you started with. Now let's look at a different scenario. You start with the same $1,000, but this time you lose quickly, and you're down to your last $100. You should probably walk away at that point because you've already lost most of your bankroll. But you don't, and instead you keep playing and you go on another run. This time you claw back $800, so now you've got $900 total. And suddenly you're overjoyed. Even though you're still down $100 from where you started, you feel like you've won. This is a classic example of how our emotions play tricks on us. In the first scenario, even though you're up $200, you feel like a failure because you could have walked away with more. But in the second scenario, despite losing $100, you feel like a winner because you clawed some of it back. It doesn't make any logical sense, but the emotional highs and lows of gambling cloud judgment. This is what happens when gamblers are caught in the dopamine loops we discussed earlier. The highs and lows aren't about the actual money, and the gambler's brain becomes addicted to the feeling of recovery in the chase of winning back what's been lost, even if it means walking away with less than what they started with. There's a lot of people who aren't familiar with options trading, but they actually play a huge role in gambling addiction. For example, there is the GameStop phenomenon. In 2021, there is the GameStop short squeeze that became a social movement. It was attracting people with little trading experience, and like gambling, options trading involves chasing losses and taking increasingly risky positions to recover, fueled by the same dopamine rush gamblers seek. And again, this has social media influence. There's platforms like Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube, and they've transformed day trading into a spectacle. Live stream trading sessions create this illusion that everybody's winning, making speculative trading feel accessible and glamorous, just like celebrity gambling streams. Both traders and gamblers believe they can outsmart the system. With GameStop, many believed they could game the system, causing people to follow social trends rather than making rational decisions, identical to the gambler's fallacy of finding patterns in randomness. Options traders chase the same dopamine hit as gamblers, particularly with volatile stocks. The emotional drivers are identical: peer pressure, social validation, constant action, and the belief that beating the impossible odds is feasible, all amplified by social media echo chambers. When investing becomes indistinguishable from gambling, you're no longer a trader. You're a player at the world's largest casino. The psychology is the same: chasing losses, euphoric wins, and the constant belief that the next big trade will change everything. Finally, while the pursuit of wins and the craving for dopamine are powerful, the losses accumulate over time. And that's when the real psychological damage happens. Gamblers often experience intense emotional pain, guilt, and shame when they lose, which only reinforces the cycle of gambling. But here's the problem: the losses never get acknowledged in the same way. The gambler's brain often minimizes the emotional pain associated with losing and instead focuses on the next opportunity to win. This emotional disconnect is a crucial part of the addiction. Gamblers lie to themselves about the severity of their losses, telling them it's just a setback or I'll make it back tomorrow. But this denial prevents them from facing the real consequences of their actions. This disconnect from reality is what makes gambling so dangerous. The gambler may suffer financial ruin, damage relationships, and even risk their mental health, but they're still trapped in the cycle, unable to break free because the craving for that next dopamine hit is too powerful. To wrap up, the psychology of gambling addiction is driven by powerful emotional and cognitive forces. Chasing losses, dopamine loops, the gambler's fallacy, and the compulsion to bet all work together to create a feedback loop that keeps the gambler trapped in a cycle of self-deception and escalating behavior. These psychological dynamics are what make gambling addiction so hard to overcome. It's not just about the money. It's about the brain's response to winning and losing, the emotional need to escape, and the irrational belief that just one more bet will turn things around. Understanding these mechanisms is key for any family member who wants to help their loved one because it helps you see the person behind the behavior.